Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is Caregiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
And welcome, everyone, to Caregiver Solutions Info. I'm so happy that you could join us today. We are live from Boca Raton, Florida. This show is for you, the family caregiver. If caregiving is what you're doing now for someone with dementia, Alzheimer's, frontal temporal lobe type dementia, it doesn't matter what the cause of the memory loss is. If you're experiencing that in a loved one and you're the caregiver, then this show is for you. This is where we ask the questions and you get the answers. We ask questions of professionals in the healthcare field. We talk to doctors, social workers, geriatric care managers. We talk to elder law attorneys. We talk to people that know geriatrics, that know dementia, and that know caregivers. We also interview caregivers because who better to know what you're going through than a fellow caregiver? So you can learn because they're walking in your shoes. And this show, if nothing else, will show you that you're not alone, that people care, and that there are resources out there to help you. So I'm so glad that you've decided to join us today, whether you're listening on local South Florida radio or whether you're joining us on the caregiversolutions.info website on your smartphone, tablet, or computer. Welcome. Today we have another awesome show for you. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to Alfonso, who lives in the Fort Lauderdale area. Now, people find us all kinds of ways. There's flyers out there, word of mouth, some advertising. And I thought it was interesting that Alfonso was last week before Hurricane Matthew was coming through. He started tuning in to the radio station and turning the dial looking for updates on Hurricane Matthew, and seeing what was going on with the storm. Well, he came across this show, and he listened to a minute of it and realized that this show was for him and that it was meant to be that he listened to the program because, you see, Alfonso is a family caregiver, and he's dealing with the issues of dementia right now. And by tuning in and just happened to come onto the program, he realized that this was information that was beneficial to him. He listened to the show. He called in. He got his 36-hour day book. I hope that you are enjoying that book, Alfonso. And I want to thank you for sharing with me your situation, and I'm glad that you found us. So however you found us, I'm glad that you did and that you're with us today. So today we're going to be talking about joy. Now, joy is something that a lot of caregivers don't seem to have much because there is no joy when you're stressed, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're resentful, when you're in the throes of it, because caregiving is so hard. It's probably the hardest thing that you'll ever do because you're not really trained to be a caregiver and you have to learn as you go. So we're going to be talking about that today. But before we get started, I also want to give everyone else out there an opportunity to get the same book that Alfonso got last week. And this is called the 36-Hour Day Book. This is provided free of charge to you as a gift from Arden Courts. Arden Courts Memory Care Community. They have 52 communities across the United States, 10 right here in Florida. And this book is something that Arden Courts would like to give to you, the family caregiver, because it's educational. And even though Arden Courts takes care of people with dementia, because memory care is all they do, they also like to educate the caregivers to help them to understand what caregiving entails, what the difference between the different types of dementia. Lots of tips in here, a lot of advice. The book was written by Dr. Peter Rabens, and it is an excellent book. If this is not in your home, on your shelf, then please call the toll-free number that I'm about to give you and tell them that you'd like to have the 36-hour day book mailed to you. That number is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. Give them your name and address, and they'll be happy to get one of these books out in the mail to you. You'll be very lucky to have one of these books because they are provided free of charge to you, so that when you have a minute, when you have some private time and you can sit and relax, and that's, not always easy for caregivers, the book is very useful as a tool because you can pick and choose the chapters that you are interested in, maybe something that you're actually experiencing at that moment in time. So please call Arden Courts for your free 36-hour day book. And we'll repeat that number later in the show if you didn't have a pen and paper handy. So today I'm very excited to have with me Dr. Javi Schroff. And Dr. Schroff is a licensed mental health counselor, and she is here to talk about finding joy. So welcome, Dr. Schroff.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Thanks so much.
I'm so glad that you're here because this is something that caregivers don't seem to have joy. Obviously, it's very difficult for them to understand, what's going on, not only with their loved one, but also within themselves. But before we get started, I wanted to tell everybody that you are with South Florida Counseling Associates, and we want to tell everybody that not only are you a licensed mental health counselor, but you have lots and lots of letters after your name. Okay. And I'm not sure what they all mean. Obviously, the PhD gives you the doctorate title, the doctor title. LMHC is licensed mental health counselor.
Correct.
Tell everybody what DAPA is, DAPA, also NCC and MS.
Okay. So DAPA stands for Diplomate of the American Psychotherapy Association, and NCC is Nationally Certified Counselor, and MS is Master of Science.
Well, I think you certainly are qualified to be here to talk about this subject that we're talking about, because we only have the best here on Caregiver Solutions Info. And I am so glad that you have agreed to share your knowledge with us, your expertise on this subject. So tell me a little bit about what you're finding. I know you have a private practice.
I do.
And you counsel a lot of caregivers.
I do.
What seems to be one of the biggest issues that caregivers are dealing with these days?
Okay, so I really want to kind of step back a little bit and start by saying that we do live in a society where predominantly we're dominated by being couples in the society. So when we become caregivers, and especially to people who have Alzheimer's disease or any kind of dementia, it's kind of extremely isolating. So I think isolation and loneliness happens to be, in my opinion, one of the biggest drawbacks when it comes to caregiving.
Because they feel like they're alone, they're themselves.
Absolutely by themselves.
And they don't have maybe family here, support systems.
Exactly. And also, Alzheimer's is such a disease that it could happen to anybody. And so friends tend to kind of not invite you when they find out that your spouse or somebody or loved one has it. And they kind of say, you know what, it's too scary. I don't want to be in that situation.
Because they maybe don't know how to handle it?
They obviously don't know how to handle it, but I think it's also people who are seniors. It's kind of a realization and a wake-up call to them that this could possibly happen to me too, and then what?
So that's sort of like a stick your head in the sand kind of a thing, like the ostrich
Absolutely.
sticks his hand. Because if we don't associate with people that have it, if we don't think about it, if we don't, worry about it, it won't happen to us.
That's pretty much the opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's kind of sad because, Alzheimer's has become more and more prevalent over the years, a lot more awareness about it coming out from all these movie stars. A lot of their parents have. Glenn Campbell, who was a movie star and a country singer, and he had a lot of publicity around him because of getting Alzheimer's and all that he went through. So it's something that, we can't ignore anymore.
Absolutely.
And for people to feel that, I always say that sometimes I think they think it's contagious.
Exactly.
Because they don't want to be near someone that has it.
I was just about to say that,
Like
yes.
it's a contagious type of thing. But let me tell you right now, we don't know what causes Alzheimer's, people. There's a lot of researchers out there and neurologists and scientists, and they're trying to figure it out. But one thing that we do know, it's not contagious.
It's definitely not contagious.
So you're not going to get Alzheimer's by, holding hands with somebody who
Exactly.
has it. You're not going to get
absolutely right.
Alzheimer's by rubbing elbows with someone and having dinner with somebody. So
Correct.
I know this is, sounds facetious, but, sometimes we have to make a point about that, because I hear this too a lot, that caregivers say, well, we used to have a lot of friends, but now they've all disappeared. And that's so sad.
It is very sad.
It really is. And so maybe, during the show, we can actually give people some tips and some advice on how to maybe reconnect with their friends, and maybe how to address the issue, and a little bit of education goes a long way.
Absolutely. I think psychoeducation in this field, and being really on top of things, especially where it comes to research, it's empowering. Once you know, you're not so scared.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And this is why we do the show, to let
Absolutely.
everybody know, give education. This is what it's all about.
Correct.
So loneliness is one of those things. And there's lots of reasons that people are alone. And we just said their friends are scared to be around them. They don't know how to handle it. They don't have maybe family. Maybe they have adult children that are out of state.
Yes.
Okay. And so what do you advise those people that feel alone because they are alone? You give them tips for going, how do they connect, I guess?
So the way I see it is coping skills.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I kind of like to broadly divide coping skills into two sections.
Okay.
So the first is emotion coping skills.
Okay.
And the other one is solution focused.
Wow. Okay. So now we're going to keep you on the tip of your toes, because when we come back from our first commercial break, Dr. Schroff is going to explain those two coping skills. So be ready. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Arden Courts is
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias, and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know, we understand, we can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias.
on caregiversolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
We are back, and with me today is Dr. Javi Schroff, and Dr. Schroff is with South Florida Counseling Associates. She is a licensed mental health counselor. She has lots of letters after her name, which we just described, which makes her an expert in her field of dealing with caregivers and all the emotions that go along with that. And today we're going to be talking about finding joy, finding moments of joy as you are a caregiver, which is probably something that you think is not possible. But Dr. Schroff is going to share with us how that is possible. So before the break, we're talking about coping skills. And you mentioned there's 2 types of coping skills.
Correct.
So talk about those again and then explain what they mean.
Okay, so pretty much I divide coping skills into 2 parts, emotion-focused coping skills and solution-focused coping skills. So pretty much I really love this quote, and the quote is, always be like a duck, calm and unruffled on the surface, but paddling like heck underneath.
Well, that's a cute image.
Yeah.
Because ducks glide, right? But
Absolutely.
And they seem so calm and serene.
Right.
But you're saying under the water, what people can't see, their
Is
their
that
feet
you're
are going crazy.
really, really crazy.
So we should all
Yes.
be a duck.
So that's
I like
probably
that.
the first thing that I would say to all caregivers is try and be on the surface as calm as possible. And the reason why I say that is because I wanted to give you a little bit of psychoeducation here today and talk to you a little bit about something called mirror neurons. Marcia, are you familiar with
Mirror neurons? I know.
Neurons.
Well, I know what mirroring is
Right.
when you're dealing
Right.
with emotions, but
So-
how does that apply to the neurons?
So let me tell you. So mirror neurons are located in the parietal section of the brain. And pretty much what they do is, so let me give you an example. When somebody stubs their toe, and you see somebody stubbing their toe, your immediate reaction instinctively is to go, ouch.
Of course.
Okay? So basically, that's the job of the mirror neuron. So you don't have to think, but instinctively you react. So if you see somebody grimacing, if they have drink a lemonade, immediately you're going to grimace. And this is
Even if you're not the one drinking it.
Exactly.
If you see them doing it, you
Exactly.
react to what they're reacting to.
Instinctively, you're
Puckering up because of
right.
the lemonade.
So you're really not thinking, but you're instinctively feeling their emotion.
Okay, that's very good analogy.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
and I've actually done that before.
Right.
Yeah.
So this really is really, really important when it comes to dealing with patients with dementia, Alzheimer's, and I'll explain to you why.
Yes, please do.
So the mirror neurons, these special neurons that we have in our brain, are pretty much the last thing to go. So even if your loved one is, say, at the moderate stage of dementia or even the severe stage of dementia, that mirror neuron and the way they can pick up your emotion, they will always have. So that's why always be like a duck, calm and unruffled on the surface, because they're going to pick up from you.
Okay. Now, I totally agree with you.
Okay.
I just didn't know when I was talking about it that it had a special name.
Okay.
Because I've always said that the person with Alzheimer's, they do pick up on the emotions of the caregivers.
Absolutely.
So if a caregiver is upset, that patient's going to be upset.
You're
The
absolutely
caregiver's
right.
angry, then your Alzheimer's person is going to show anger behaviors, angry behaviors, and on and on and on. I didn't know that, it was a special name of the
Right.
mirror neurons, but it
Right.
makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So you want to have the caregiver be calm so that their loved one stays
Right.
calm.
So first of all, when we talk about emotion-focused coping skills, this is primarily for the caregiver in the sense that the caregiver has to have the oxygen mask on first.
We've all heard that before on the airplane.
Correct. So before you want to help somebody else, you have to help yourself. And in order to do that, you have to take care of yourself. So emotion focused is taking care of your own emotions first before you can take care of somebody else's emotions.
And that's not easy for caregivers to do.
Absolutely.
Because they say, here's what they say, and I'm sure you've heard this. I don't have time to take care of
Right.
myself. When am
Right.
I going to have time?
Right.
I'm too busy. I've got to do this, this, and this. And most of the time they do complain about not having the time. So what do you say to somebody who says, I don't have time?
So if they say that they don't have time, my almost immediate answer is you have to make the time for yourself because it's really, really important, which comes back to the isolation factor. You don't want to isolate yourself. look, Marcia, we were not meant to be islands. We are meant to be interacting with human beings. I think there's some research out there that says you have to have at least 3 or 4 hours of eye-to-eye physical contact with another human being in order to feel like you're worthwhile.
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis.
And isn't there a song out there somewhere, people need people?
People, yes.
I mean, really,
Yes.
I mean, it makes sense because
Absolutely.
people do need people. Yeah. So they make the time, and how do you make time? You schedule it.
You absolutely schedule it. And the other important thing for caregivers is always ask for help. That's the most important thing. So besides making the time, how are you going to make the time if you don't ask for help?
And again, very difficult, we
Right.
find, for caregivers to ask for help because nobody does it as well as they do, right? They have a certain way of
Right.
doing things, and they want to maybe enjoy some time to themselves, but they're afraid that their loved one's going to suffer because maybe the person helping doesn't cut the sandwich exactly the same way. Do you remember when we had kids in school and we're
Absolutely.
cutting their
Yeah.
lunch sandwiches? And if you ever made a sandwich for a kid and their sandwich was always cut in half, but you cut it triangular or in squares, did that upset them? Because it was different.
Right.
It was still a sandwich. It still had the same ingredients.
You're right.
It still served the same purpose. It still fed your body.
Right.
But it was cut different. So all it was presented in a different way.
Correct.
Right? And I don't know why I thought of that as an analogy, but I think it works.
It does work.
Yeah.
And the other thing on the other spectrum, if we look at the same thing, it's not that they don't trust somebody else, but it's that they want to do it themselves and they want to be best at it. So then you get that self-judging thing that comes in where, am I good enough? Am I doing the job right? So it's that self-doubt again that comes in, which is again not good because that causes anxiety, and we know anxiety causes stress.
Now, that self-doubt, does that have anything to do with martyrdom? Where people think, I'm going to do or die, and if I have to die doing this, I will, because I need to have that accolade that I am the best, and because they're going to be a martyr doing. Does that
I
tie in?
don't feel like I would like to generalize that, but some individuals, yes,
Okay.
but not necessarily so. I wouldn't say that. But usually, we do know that 2/3 of the caregivers are women.
Yeah, okay.
And so when we're looking at women, and if they are taking care of their loved one, whether it's a spouse or a mom or a dad or whoever it is, I think that self-doubt is more prevalent in the women caregivers than it is in the men caregivers. And that's what I found in my practice, at least, where they feel like we really need to get this right, and do right by our loved one.
But they want to be perfect, all right? And there is no perfection in anything.
There is not. You're
and
right.
so one of the things that I think caregivers have to learn from this is that you don't have to be perfect to get the job done. If you ask for help, which you should, don't worry that it's not perfect, because
Right.
technically you don't do it perfect either all the time.
Right.
Maybe you do once in a while, but not all the time, because nothing's always perfect. And if we let go of that need to be perfect, I think sometimes that type A personality, where everything has to be just right and just so, it'll drive you nuts.
Right.
And you don't want to drive yourself nuts, because believe me, you can get there all on your own without helping yourself.
Right.
So don't be worried about being a perfectionist.
Absolutely.
And ask for help. So these
Absolutely.
are great tips
Right.
you're giving us. So tell us more.
So there's another area that I wanted to kind of focus on a little bit, and this area is called the sense of coherence.
Sense of coherence.
Yes. It's a psychological term, and I actually did my research partly on this. What that means is when somebody is faced with a challenging situation, such as an illness or a trauma or anything such as that, how does that person make meaning of what's happened to them?
Okay, so the question is, how do you make meaning of what happened to them? My question is, why do they need to make meaning out of what happened to them?
Because they need to find a sense of purpose for themselves to go on and make, and with that purpose comes the ability to help somebody else.
That sounds kind of complicated.
It is complicated. So basically, the way I look at it is, let's take, for example, if my mom has Parkinson's disease, I want to be her caregiver.
Right.
But I'm at the stage of denial where I can't believe this has actually happened to her. And I go through all the stages of loss, which is, the denial, the grief, everything that's happening, the doubt, the depression, the blaming, everything that goes through on those 5 stages, put out by Kubler-Ross.
I think you need to see a psychotherapist. You've gone through all those stages. But I'm making light of it, but it's truly something that all of those emotions that you just said, that is exactly what a caregiver can go through. Now, not everybody goes through every one.
No, not everyone.
And they can skip some or whatever, and not everybody's the same, and they don't process it the same way. But when you're, just like you said, that litany of all of those feelings and all of those emotions, I mean, right there, it's like you're so jumbled up, you can't think.
Absolutely.
Right? It makes you almost paralyzed, doesn't it?
Sometimes it does.
Yes.
And so pretty much coming to the last stage, which is that of acceptance. So here's where acceptance goes hand in hand with the sense of coherence. So if you accept what's happened to you, you find meaning and purpose in what's going on in your life. And so basically, as a caregiver, you don't have to give up your identity and your sense of purpose and your meaning just because your your loved one, has been diagnosed with this diagnosis, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so in other words, let's try to put it in my terms. If you're a caregiver and you finally, after you're going through those emotions, get to the point of acceptance that, yes, my mom has Parkinson's disease, and with it comes some related dementia, because Parkinson's-related dementia is very common. And I know that she has it. I've accepted the fact that she's not going to get better, and I'm her caregiver. So now I want to look at it like, that being said, what's my role? My purpose is to be her caregiver, but my role is to find how to be the best caregiver?
How to be the best caregiver, but not to give up my identity.
Gotcha. Okay. So I can be a daughter and a caregiver.
Exactly. And I can still be a doctor. I can still be a dancer. Whatever interests I had, I can still continue with those. Coming back to your point of being a martyr, I don't necessarily have to be a martyr and just get so self-absorbed with taking care of my mom.
Okay, I got it.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So we all have different titles.
Exactly.
I love the one you said, dancer, because I'm a dancer, and I would find it very, very difficult to give up my dancing to completely give it up to do something for somebody. You want to because you love that person, and you would give everything you had to help that person. But to your point, if I had to give up my dancing helps me, gives me joy.
Correct.
And I think this is what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
And my joy comes from dancing. And so if I'm a caregiver for my mom, would she be better off if I had joy because one night when she was okay, and maybe she had company and someone else was helping her, watching her, that I still got to go and get a couple hours of dancing, and then I come back and I'm happy and
you're joyful.
And I'm joyful, and I love this.
Right.
Okay? I love that you said that because I related to that. But you also said you can still be a doctor, meaning you can be your profession.
Exactly.
Whatever your career is. You don't need to give up your whole career to be a caregiver.
Absolutely.
You don't give up being an actual spouse to be a caregiver.
You don't give up being a friend. You don't have to lose your friends just because you've become a caregiver. That's the biggest thing that I find with my caregivers, that they feel like, it's almost like a stigma. My spouse has Alzheimer's. It's a stigma. I don't want anybody to know about it in the initial stages. And then when people do know about it, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my friends. If I tell anybody. But
what you really want to do is tell everybody so that they all know, and then they will hopefully want to support you.
Absolutely.
And in any way that they can.
Yes.
Whether it's running to the store to get something, or picking up the phone and just to let you vent, or whatever. So this way you're not isolated. And of course, some friends are going to stay away. But again, that all comes back to education and personalities and all that. So this is great. Great stuff. We are learning a lot from Dr. Javi Schroff, and we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, she has more good stuff for us. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney, but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming?
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know, we understand, we can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
Solutions.
Hi, and welcome back to Caregiver Solutions Info Show. I'm Marcia Teele. My guest today is Dr. Javi Schroff. She is a licensed mental health counselor with South Florida Counseling Associates here in South Florida, specifically Delray Beach. And we're talking about finding joy in the moment for caregiving. So we're talking about coping skills right now, and she's sharing with us two different kinds of coping skills. We're in the emotional type, and I know you have another emotional coping skill that we want to talk about.
So one of the things that I always tell my caregivers that they really need to be is that they need to be flexible. I think it's easier said than done. But I think being flexible and being in the moment, because we know that our loved ones can change not only from day to day, but from moment to moment.
True.
And we really need to be on our tippy toes. And if we're kind of sometimes rigid, the end goal or the end result can get much more difficult to get to.
So if you're stubborn, if you're a stubborn person, you better change right now because your loved one with dementia, they're not changing.
Right, exactly.
All right? So you have to adjust to them.
Exactly.
And adjusting is being flexible.
Exactly. And there's a quote that somebody said that I really love and I use a lot. Sometimes in order to stand up straight, you have to lean against the wind. So you have to be flexible sometimes in order to stand up straight.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So you kind of go, like a tree. You kind of have to lean into the wind in order to stand up straight.
Okay. And that way you won't break.
That way you won't break. Absolutely.
So if you're leaning in, it's like on a motorcycle too.
Right.
If you're a passenger on a motorcycle and you're going, the driver of the motorcycle is turning left, you don't want to be leaning right.
Exactly.
You want to lean with it.
Exactly.
Because you're going to have a better ride.
Exactly.
All right. So look, whether you like trees or motorcycles, we have the best analogy for you on this.
Right.
It makes sense. It really does. And that's hard, though, for people to do.
It is extremely
to be
hard.
flexible because people like things. It kind of goes back to being that perfectionist type. We're going to do it this way or we're going to do it my way. And sometimes, it doesn't work out that way. So if you don't have a plan B or C, D, E, F, G, you might be in trouble.
So actually that segues me nicely into the solution focus.
How about that? Okay. So now this is the other focus of...
So the other kind of coping skill, which is solution focused. So let's take a concrete example. I currently have a caregiver who is taking care of her spouse, and the spouse is about the moderate stage of Alzheimer's, and so we know that pretty much language is kind of minimal. Cognitions are really, there's deficits in the cognitions. Lots of behavioral issues, extreme stubbornness, needs 24/7 help with activities of daily living.
Which is bathing, dressing, toileting, eating,
all of those things. And so it was really interesting because the caregiver came to me and said, I just cannot get my spouse off of the toilet. No matter what I do, I can't get him off of the toilet.
Just wants to sit there all day.
He just wants to sit there all day. So, and she would beg and cajole and scream and shout, and nothing would work. And the more irritated she would get, the more irritated her loved one would get.
Right, because that goes back to your mirror neurons happening that we just talked about.
So I just told her, what does he really, really like to eat?
Chocolate.
Ice cream.
Ice cream, okay, whatever works.
Exactly. And so I basically said, the next time this happens, just say, I'm just going to call him Tom. Tommy, how about a bowl of ice cream? And she did it, and she got him to get up. So what I'm saying is that's her solution to her problem. She needs him to get up. So whether it's whatever she has to do to get him off the pot to get into bed.
Yeah. Now, isn't that like what we used to do with our kids? We used to bribe our kids.
Right.
Right? If you pick up your toys, right, I'll give you a lollipop.
Right.
Same thing.
Right.
All right. So if you had little kids, just think about that because it's sort of the same thing. You got to do what works. And bribery, there's nothing wrong with a little bribery.
No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a little bribery.
I mean, it's not going to hurt anybody.
And actually, the research shows that as the disease progresses, age regresses.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a perfect scenario. So you're almost treating your loved one as a 2-year-old.
Right, because they go back in time
Exactly.
and become more childlike as the disease progresses. So, they might start out as, a teenager and they're very rebellious. And as the disease progresses, now they're a 12-year-old. And it could progress more. They become like a 5-year-old, a little bit more, a 2-year-old, and finally unfortunately, end-stage dementia.
Correct.
They're an infant.
Right.
And for those people that, really haven't heard that before, I just wanted to kind of give like a little visual picture of that because unfortunately it does go that way. And you do need to be aware of it because eventually it will happen. So, okay, I like the ice cream. I love ice cream. That'll work for me.
Okay. So, coming to things like we've often found, at least I've often found in my practice, that there are certain objects that our loved one is attached to. So be it a pocketbook, be it a favorite jacket, be it a favorite doll or a toy, depending on what stage of the disease that they are in. Or it could be, like my client, their favorite nightgown.
Okay.
And every time my client is told by, every time my male client tells his wife, honey, let's get ready, we need to go to the doctor.
Right.
She just wants to wear her nightgown.
Okay.
That's totally fine.
So he lets her wear her nightgown.
So he lets her. It didn't used to be that way. It would be a constant tussle and a constant fight.
No. We can't wear your nightgown. We got to get dressed. What would people think? Oh my gosh, it's 3 p.m, and what would people think if I walked you into the doctor's office in your nightgown? People would people would stare. People would think I'm a terrible caregiver. People would look at you and think, what's wrong with you? Because it's not time for bed, right? This is what's going on in somebody's mind.
Exactly.
And like you said, what's wrong if it works to get your loved one with dementia into the doctor and they're wearing a nightgown? I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that.
Exactly.
As long as they're decent and,
they're clean.
And they're clean. And
that's all that matters.
And maybe put a jacket or a sweater over and you're good to go.
Exactly.
So that was the solution.
That was the solution.
And didn't the man have more joy because now he's happier because his wife will go with him to the doctor?
In fact, so what he started to do is he lays out 2 different nightgowns on the bed and says, honey, which one, and it's always the same one, but at least he feels like he's giving her a choice.
And she feels like she's
there's-
getting a
exactly.
choice and not being told what to
Right,
do.
exactly.
Because that's very important too. And if that's another tip, you've
Yes.
kind of combined two in one right there, because you want to give your loved one choices, but you want to make sure that there's no wrong choices. So whatever they choose, you have to be okay with it. And that's a part of
Absolutely.
being flexible too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Okay, keep going. This is good stuff.
So the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is what I like to call the spin.
The spin.
Yes.
And that's not twirling around.
Not twirling around.
Okay.
It's that constant question. Why am I here? Where am I? What are we doing here? When are we going to go home? I want to go home to mommy. Or it's that constant questioning. And
Over and over and over and over and over.
again.
So,
And
okay.
I call that the spin.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm sure
So-
that you all are familiar with
Right.
that because you've experienced this. This is
Right.
especially in the earlier stages when they're confused and and they
absolutely.
don't and they want to go home, but maybe they are home.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the only advice at this point that I give all my caregivers is the only emotion required at this stage is reassurance.
Okay.
Okay?
So give me an example.
So an example would be, okay, honey, we're going to go in a minute, because time really is not important at that point. So things like, if they keep saying, where are we going? Instead of saying, we're going here or there or whatever, I say, where would you like to go? And we switch it.
And if they want to go somewhere,
And they go, and they say, I want to go home. Okay, honey, let's get in the car. Let's go home.
and then by the time you get in the car, they've
They've
forgotten
forgotten.
about it. So
Right.
then you can get them to the,
Right.
the
Because
doctor.
at this point in time, what we're trying to do is not have the anxiety come up for the caregiver or for our loved one.
And by
So-
not having these mirror neurons affect the way
Exactly.
that the behavior is going, that ultimately, again,
It reduces
gives,
stress.
and reducing stress brings happiness and joy in the moment.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
I love it. And these are little moments,
Right.
but if you have enough little moments of joy,
It is.
you're going to have and enough of them and constantly, because you've learned these techniques and you've learned how to bribe and say the right things or do the right things when you're a caregiver, you're going
Right.
to create more joyful moments and ultimately you'll produce happiness within
Absolutely.
yourself. And if you're not happy, I mean, happy is, a relative word, but more contentment, more satisfaction that, whew, I did that. I got through that problem because that could have been a bad problem, but I did what Dr. Javi told me, and guess what? It worked.
And that, Marcia, actually brings us to another important point, which is with the reduction of caregiver burden, it brings about a better quality of life for both the caregiver and for our loved one.
Yes.
And which to me is huge. With the quality of life, and sometimes we tend to forget that even though our loved one is at the severe or the end stage of the disease, they're still a whole human being, and they need to be treated as such. And the quality of life is so very important, not just for the caregiver, but also for the person who has the disease. And using simple things like humor, infusing humor into daily activities. So whatever you're doing, yeah, Mom, that's a really funny joke if by chance they said something or they reacted to something. Just by saying something, you're going to see their faces light up because your face is lit up. So again, the mirror neurons, they're mirroring your reaction and your response to what's happening in the situation.
And sometimes, don't you have to fake it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, you have to fake
really,
it.
if you're dealing with someone with dementia and you're trying to get them to do something and you use humor, all right, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. But like you said, if you're exhibiting that it's funny, and even if it's a kind of a fake thing that you're doing, they're going to go along with it. So if you're laughing, and they're going to laugh. If they think you think it's funny, they're going to think it's funny.
Absolutely.
They don't know sometimes because of their cognitive deficit that they
Right.
can understand the joke. They don't
Yes.
get it, but
Yes.
But if you're laughing, they're going to laugh and everybody's happy.
Good.
It's sort of
Yeah.
like, I do yoga sometimes, and we have laughter therapy in yoga where the yoga teacher will start laughing, and pretty soon everybody
Everybody's
else is
laughing.
laughing. Isn't that
Yeah.
sort of what we're
Yeah,
talking
exactly.
about? Yeah, I love
Exactly.
that. Wow, this is really good. We're going to take our last quick commercial breaks, and we'll be back and finish up with Dr. Javi Schroff. You don't want to miss it. We'll be right back.
Do you need the advice?
Being unable to recognize the obvious often occurs with Alzheimer's or related dementias, even among their caregivers. When the time comes for you to decide that someone you love needs more help than you can give, will you be able to recognize it? Don't wait for a crisis to make the decision for you. Talk to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Somewhere at the corner of bewildered and confused is a lost mother, a father, a sibling, a grandparent. Wandering is a common symptom of Alzheimer's or related dementias and can often make those who care for a loved one feel just as lost. If you're looking for a place that's safe and secure, look to Arden Courts. Memory care is all we do. We know, we understand, we can help. To learn more, visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines. Feelings of depression, isolation, and frustration are common among persons living with Alzheimer's or related dementias. It's common among those who care for them, too. It takes a lot of patience and courage. It also takes knowing when you can no longer do it alone. At Arden Courts, memory care is all we do. Talk to us. We know, we understand, we can help. Don't let guilt keep you from making the right decision. Visit arden-courts.com. Arden Courts follows equal housing opportunity guidelines.
Solutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, and I am here with the wonderful Dr. Javi Schroff. She is a licensed mental health counselor with South Florida Counseling Associates in Delray Beach. Thank you for coming. This is such good stuff.
Thank
We're
you for
talking
having
about
me.
finding joy, how caregivers can find joy, because they really can if they know the techniques.
Absolutely.
And you're sharing all those techniques with us. So let's talk about something that caregivers can use, again, to find joy in the moment. To help maybe reduce arguments, because there are a lot of caregivers who argue with their loved one that has dementia because maybe the patient, I'll just call him the patient, says something that's not right. And the caregiver's like, no, that's not right. You know, remember when? And they try to explain it, and it seems like it frustrates everybody because obviously the person with dementia can't remember, and the caregiver's trying to say, no, remember, you remember, and like, that's the worst thing you can do, right? All right, so how does a caregiver get over that, and what can they do to make that situation better?
So, Marcia, in my practice, I use something called validation therapy. It was started by somebody called Naomi File. She was a social worker, and she first started using it for people with dementia and memory problems. And there's a lot of research, so you can go up and look at it. It's called validation therapy. So I actually use a combination of validation therapy and client-centered therapy. And the proponent of client-centered therapy is a humanist psychologist by the name of Carl Rogers. So you can look that one up as well. So basically, I really like that both of these go hand in hand. Validation really speaks of the here and now, just as Rogerian therapy or humanistic therapy or client-centered therapy, they all talk of the same thing. So let's take a really concrete example.
Okay, we like examples.
Okay. So oftentimes we find our loved one will tell us that I was lying in bed and so-and-so person came in and I was so frightened and they stole my beautiful brooch.
Gosh, have I heard that story before?
Right.
Maybe about 100 times.
Correct. So instead of saying, no, mom, don't be silly, that couldn't have happened. And then, the anxiety starts, the arguments start, the fighting start, everybody gets agitated in the situation.
Absolutely.
In validation therapy and in client-centered therapy, I would turn around and say, okay, mom, I'm hearing you say that you're really, really upset that you lost your brooch.
Yes.
So
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am, dear.
Okay.
It's missing, and that man took it.
all right, so tell me about that brooch, mom. Why is it so special to you?
Well, that's the one that my mother gave me, and I really love it because I love the color. It's blue,
Right.
and I need that because it's special, and I don't want to lose it, and it's gone, and that man took it.
Okay, so, Marcia, how about we take a walk together, and try and find it together? How about that? Would you like me to find it for you?
Well, of course I would like you to find it for me. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go find it.
Okay. And sometimes they go, you find it. And so then you can kind of pretend to look around for it. And even if it means, mom, maybe it's at home. And then you go back home and bring a similar brooch. If she brings it up again, then you have the brooch.
Okay.
So there's different ways of being in the moment with your loved one. And pretty much being in the moment is having that empathy,
Yes.
having that non-judgmental positive regard for the person.
Okay.
And empathy is really being able to walk in the other person's shoes.
Yeah, how do they feel? Because you asked me,
Exactly.
how do you feel about that? And I
Exactly.
said, it's important to me. So
Right.
you're trying to understand what I'm really upset about. And you kind of took the focus off the man coming in the room
Exactly.
because we know that that's not
Exactly.
possible and it wasn't true.
Right.
But you took the focus off of that, centered on what was important to her and why it was important to her.
Exactly.
And now she's calming down and she feels better because you're going to help her find it. And now you've actually distracted her because you're
Exactly.
going to look for it.
I couldn't
So-
have said it better.
Okay. Well, it was my brooch. Of course I wanted to find it. No, it was really good. It's that's a little role play that we did. And I think it does help caregivers to role play and understand, the situations. And validation therapy is something that anybody can do. So if your loved one, if you're taking a walk and you see orange flowers and your loved one says, oh, aren't those pretty blue flowers? Are you going to say, no, they're not blue, they're orange?
Orange.
No, you're not going to say that. You're going to say, yes, and aren't they a beautiful shade of blue? All right, what difference does it make
Exactly.
whether they're orange or blue or green or black or whatever color? The important thing is, I'm sure you would agree, that they're enjoying the beautiful flowers together.
And creating moments of joy together.
There you go. That was perfect. That was perfect. I think that, people get hung up a lot on being perfect again and being right. And if you're a person that you like to be right all the time, you're going to have a harder time being a caregiver because
Absolutely.
you can't be right and be a caregiver all the time and have joy in your life because you got to give up some of that, validate your loved one, agree with them. If you can, if it's not going to hurt anything, just agree and you'll have joy. So I want to thank you for coming today. You were marvelous.
Thank you for having me. I really
I
appreciate it.
totally enjoyed everything we talked about. If someone would like to contact you,
Sure.
can they do that and how?
Okay, so like I said, my name is Dr. Hovey Schroff. My private practice is in Delray, and the address is 1200 Northwest 17th Avenue. That's in Delray Beach. And you can reach me at 561-800-2527, or you can also find me at my website, which is www.drhovey.com.
And you want to call Dr. Hovey because she is so good and she is so nice and she will help you. If you're a caregiver and you're struggling with some of these issues that we talked about, please give her a call and she'll be happy to help you too. And don't forget, call 888-478-2410 to get your free copy of the 36-hour day book, 888-478-2410. And don't forget, in the meantime, till next week, give someone a hug or maybe a few because they need it and so do you. So take care and we'll see you next time.
Thank Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily